Welcome everybody to World Physiotherapy's support program for speakers at the World Physiotherapy Congress 2021 online. We're delighted you're joining us today. It's one of a series of webinars we're doing to support you as we transition to delivering our first Congress online. I'm Tracy Berry. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at World Physiotherapy, heavily involved with all aspects of the Congress and supporting the scientific programme as well. I'm joined today by Helen von Dadelsen from Present Potential, and Helen's going to bring a wealth of experience to support you in presenting your best presentation online. Helen worked with us ahead of the 2019 Congress, so has been able to work with us in adapting our support materials to help you present an engaging presentation online. I'm also grateful that we've got Rachel Thompson in the background from the team and from the office supporting us through the delivery of this session. So today's webinar is focused particularly for people presenting abstracts. Now, before we start, there's just a few bits of information to convey. So you've all joined us on mute with your cameras off. We welcome questions at any time throughout this webinar, and we will break at certain points. To do that, please use the control that is in Zoom. So it's the Q&A where we really want you to put your questions. Now there's also chat. That's where you can say hi, you can add your own comments as well. And what we'd like you to do now is to find the chat control at the bottom of your screens, to click on that and make sure it's selected to go to all attendees and not just to panelists. Then we'd love for you to add where you are, what type of presentation that you're doing. Is it a classic platform? Is it a state of the art? Is it an e-poster? So if you can do that in the chat, we'll get a feel for who's online. So as I say, questions and answers, if you pop them in there as we go along, we'll come back to them. And then the chat's there where you can help support or other comments. The webinar is designed to last about an hour, but we are finding it goes over because we're making sure we answer people's questions and we're not rushing at the end. So if anybody feels their questions haven't been answered, please stay online because we will stay here to address those for you. The webinar is being recorded. It is being made available on World Physiotherapy's website, so you can come back to it again, and also to support those unable to join us at the times that we're running them. If you have any technology problems during this session, please email info@world.physio and Rach from the team will be pleased to help you. So I can see the chats are coming in, which is great, and we've got a diverse group joining us. And I'm sure amongst that is different experiences. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk a bit about the different session formats, and we're going to introduce you to the online platform. We'll have a bit of a question break then and hand over to Helen, who's going to help you prepare and deliver your best presentation. We've then got question times after that section, and I know Helen's going to do a little bit of interaction as we go along, and we're going to end with some really important date reminders for you all to take away. So before we start, we'd like to ask you how confident you're feeling about presenting at this Congress online. So we're going to pop up a poll here, and we'd love your feedback. So Rach, if you could just launch the poll for me, please. So how confident do you feel about presenting at the conference? And we'll just give you a bit of time to complete that. Okay, thanks, Rachel. If we can shut that and then we'll share it. So we can see that 44% of you feel okay about it. just over 40% feel confident or very confident, and a percentage of you in the not very confident. And somebody feeling terrified and worried. Now, I'm going to promise you, and we're going to hold you to this, that we're going to lift you up and hopefully repeat this at the end, and we'll find this has shifted, because then we'll have done our job. So we'll stop sharing the poll results now, and we'll move on. So what's going to be happening this time with the presentations? Same but different. So we are still calling oral presentations the platform presentations. Classic platform ones are going to be a recording of up to 8 minutes. Those that have been selected as state of the art, and that's a smaller select group, have up to 12 minutes. Then the e-poster presentations, they're going to be in PowerPoint format in the 16:9, and we've provided some sample templates in both a traditional and a better poster format, which we'll show you a little bit later. And these have the option to add an audio recording of up to 5 minutes. And so we're going to be advocating as we go through this, anything you can do that adds to the basic content will add value to your presentation and to the participants' experience. So you don't have a set presentation time. You will all receive notices, yesterday in fact, to upload your content by the 11th of March. And we're going to keep emphasizing that 11th of March deadline. So your content will be there in the on-demand area, accessible for all people from the minute we go live all the way through for 3 months after the Congress. So the exposure is significant, and that's a really important opportunity for you. So here's a sneak peek at the platform that will be going live at some point next week. So when you come in, you're going to log in, and you will have already registered and had your login details. So from the platform, you will be able to search across programs. You'll be able to look at what's on live now. You'll be able to go to the planner and plan the sessions that you want to look at. And the on-demand area is where all of your content from your abstracts is going to be. You can also search for speakers and session by type. So if you click on the on-demand area, you then move into the next level of content, and there will be the option to search across here. So any of the live sessions that we've been running will also move into this area, and they will be the recorded sessions. So your abstracts will appear under platform presentations and e-posters. Those that have been identified as state of the art will also appear listed in the state of the art selection. And those that have been given an abstract award through the judging process will also be highlighted. Now, you could be really lucky and find yourself in 3 of those locations. And it's a way in which we're trying to really draw attention to just how important the abstract content is to the program. So if you click on the platform presentation section, it will then take you in, and you would select an abstract that you're interested in once you've identified it. You'll then be able to play the presentation that you're going to put forwards and created it on the basis of the advice that Helen's going to give you. There will also be access to the abstract and a comments feature. So you're not going to be live and there to answer questions from participants, but the comments are going to be there and will be there for the whole of the live period and into that on-demand time. So we're going to encourage you to check back in frequently across those live days between the 9th and the 11th of April, so that you can see comments that are coming in or questions, and then you can go in and answer them directly. You may also find that people find you in the speakers list and the registration and want to sort of private message you. And you're going to be able to do that through your registration. You can make yourself publicly known through your profile. And we'd advocate for that because it means that you're accessible to all participants. Then once we get beyond the 11th of April, we're encouraging you again to check back in on a regular basis, because people will continue to be accessing that content. So what about the e-posters? So as I say, we'll got some templates that you can use, or you can create your own as one PowerPoint slide. This is a traditional looking poster. It's just one way in which you can do it, and we've got a template for that. You may well find you've also got guidance from your institution or where you work to actually follow. What I do want to draw your attention to is the huge benefit of adding content beyond the poster itself. And we have guidance on this in the poster tips that we've produced. And the easiest way of doing that is generating a QR code in your poster, which can then link to another website where you can host additional resources. You could think about a different version in a range of languages if you speak more than one language. You could link to additional resources that come out of your work or further information. And again, the comments feature operates in the same way. So having looked at that image of a traditional poster format, you can contrast that with something called a better poster. And this is an initiative that's been going for a couple of years. Anybody who's been watching this on Twitter and other places, it's an example about how you can present your research or your practice development in a more engaging way by focusing on your conclusions, grabbing somebody's attention before getting into all the detail. Same principles, again, using a QR code to try and draw attention and guide people to additional information. So on our website, we have got platform presentation tips. We've also got e-poster presentation tips, and we've got a PowerPoint template for both of these that are actually up there. So I'm going to pause there with regard to the actual session formats and just check if we've got any questions come in. So I can't see any in the Q&A. Helen, have you spotted any coming in through the chat?
There is just one coming in now from Cara. Can you share the links for the templates? Maybe we could do that in the chat.
Yep, I'll do that now. So if I hand over to you, I'll go and find that information, put it straight in the chat for everybody.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. And don't worry if you have other questions. If other questions come to your mind, we will have the opportunity to answer those a little bit later on. So thank you everyone for taking the time for this training today. My name is Helen von Dadelson and I am the founder of Present Potential. I provide presentation and speaker training and coaching to help people build on existing skills and unlock potential. And I also worked for many years in the international NGO world. So I'm very familiar with these health conferences. And of course, I worked for the 2019 Congress as well with Tracy and the team. So now Tracy has given you an introduction to what is expected of you in terms of what you need to upload, etc. How do you get there? Well, today we're going to cover hopefully everything you need to get you on the right path. We will cover virtual presenting because it is different from presenting in person at a Congress Centre. Audience, who's going to be listening and watching your presentation? Structure, how do you build a strong, focused structure so that you are imparting your knowledge and sharing your research with the physio world? PowerPoint, as you saw, it's so important both for the e-poster and the abstract presentations. So I'm going to give some tips and maybe some new ideas that you can take forward for that. And finally, recording. All of your presentations need to be recorded and uploaded. So I've got some tips on how you can do that as well. You'll probably remember that at the beginning of this session, when you registered for this event, we asked you what you were most worried about when presenting on camera or virtually. So how did you answer? Well, the one that came with the most people, 67% of you who registered, said that you're worried about keeping the presentation interesting and engaging. And I'm actually really happy to hear that. That means that you know that in the virtual space, you need to be even more engaging, have more energy, work harder to get your message across and keep the audience with you. So I've got some tips that will help you to do that. The second thing that came up was half of the people who registered for this event were worried about the lack of feedback or atmosphere and energy from the audience. And it's true that it's different from speaking in a big Congress hall when you're just sitting in your own room or office speaking to yourself into the camera. It's difficult to keep that energy up and you don't get that feedback from the audience. So I'll give you some tips on how to overcome that as well. And the third thing that came up most commonly from you, almost half of you were worried about those technological challenges, how to record, upload, worried about unstable internet and things like that. So Tracy's already started talking about some of those elements and I'll address them in the presentation. And of course, we're available to answer any questions that you might have following the presentation. During my part of the presentation, I will ask you to do a little bit of work. So please use the chat function and remember to change it so that everyone can see your responses, because it's useful for us for everyone to see what other people think, feel, and their feedback. And also don't forget to put your questions into the Q&A function, and I will stop periodically to address those questions. So first, virtually speaking. How do we now engage our audience in this space? So it is different from being in the conference center. Usually when people go to such an event, they've taken time off work. They've put their out of office message on their emails. They've traveled a long way. And it's quite different in a virtual event because probably most people will just be trying to squeeze as much content into their already really busy schedule. So they don't necessarily have dedicated time to spend on this. And that's challenging as a presenter. So we really need to step things up and make it worthwhile for the audience to tune in. The other thing is that a lot of people around the world are working from home and have other things vying for their attention. They have email notifications, their smartphone is ringing, they might have a dog, a cat, the postman, a child to look after. And all of these things distract them from watching the presentation in an engaged way. So how do we keep it lively and engaging? Well, we need to give more energy and show more passion in our presentation. In some ways, the camera dulls down our energy, so we really need to give even more than we would normally standing on the stage in a conference center. A couple of really quick tips on how you can do that immediately. The first one is to sit on the edge of your chair, as I'm doing right now. Don't sit on your Swiss ball, because then you tend to swivel on it, but sit on a chair forward so that you're not tempted to slouch and lose energy. When you're up with your core engaged, you all know this, you're in the physio world, we have better energy, we have the oxygen can flow better, and that already encourages you to be more energetic in your presenting. You could also stand up. So if you feel more comfortable doing so, definitely set yourself up to record standing up. And that also gives you more space to use your hands and gives really good energy to your whole body and eventually your voice. The next thing that I think makes such a difference is train yourself to look into the camera. I'm sure you've always heard about how important eye contact is, but in the virtual world, our eye contact comes through the lens. So hopefully I'm showing you throughout this presentation how to do that. As much as possible, I'm looking directly into the lens so that you as the audience feel like I'm speaking directly to you. It does take some training, okay? Often I'll have to look down to my notes Sometimes I'll have to look to the chat, but whenever possible, my default is to look directly into that lens. The other thing that can really help with, and it's very simple in a way, is to bring some energy and interest into your voice. Try to get away from speaking in a monotone. I know that your research is really interesting, so show it in your voice. Bring emotion. Don't be shy to bring your character and your emotion and your energy into your voice. It really does make a difference in this online space and helps people keep with you throughout your presentation. And for the other thing I wanted you to think about when we're talking virtually is really focusing on the audience. And that's what we're going to look at next. There are different ways we can do that. We can ask a rhetorical question, get the audience thinking critically about something. These are recorded presentations, but as Tracy explained, you do have the opportunity to have a chat. So ideally, the more comments, the more responses, the better. Even if they're a month or so later, that starts the conversation. That means that you've really had impact on the audience. So don't be afraid to really challenge them and think from their point of view. So in speaking about the audience, who will you be speaking to? Well, this is the first time that we've held this event online, so we're never quite sure. We have over 1,600 registrations already, with more than 5 weeks to go before the actual event. And so we'll have many more than that. And as Tracy said, this is a great opportunity for you to get out there, for you to promote what you're doing and to get known in the field. So who's likely to tune in? Well, what we do know is that you will have people from all over the world. Just as you will have seen for this webinar, we've got a huge range of people from everywhere around the world, and that will be the same. So you will have a very diverse audience in terms of experience level. So you have from student physio right up to retired physio. You have people from all different specialities within the physio discipline. And you need to remember that some people don't necessarily know as much as you do about your topic. Probably no one does, and that's why you're presenting. So you might need to adjust how you explain the context. You might need to simplify some jargon or get rid of some technical terms so that it is more accessible. The other thing about speaking internationally is that most people will not be English native speakers. And I saw that probably some people on this webinar are also speaking English as a second, third, or even fourth language. And what that does as an audience member is it means that we need to adjust our ear for each accent that we're listening to. And that can take some time. So that means we need to, as a presenter, slow down. Now, speaking of accents, as a fun exercise, in the chat, tell me where you think I come from. See if anyone can get this, because I've been overseas for many, many years, and my accent is kind of strange. Let's see if we have anyone who can see. Okay. Oh, Hungary. No, not Colombia, Brazil, Netherlands, UK. No. We've got a few there. Australia getting closer. I see one correct answer. Australia, US, Netherlands, Australian. No, I'm not in Australia. South Africa. No, Australia's closer. Not quite. We have Susanna, I think, who got the right answer. New Zealand. So you can probably see my chat there. New Zealand. I come from New Zealand, but I've been overseas for over 20 years now. So that's why my accent's becoming a little bit strange. But just as you needed to adjust from Tracy's more British accent to my own, think about all the audience members who have to switch from one to the other with all of the content they're seeing. Give them a chance, slow down, just slowing down, and maybe in your script writing, slow down if you know that you often go too quickly. This is going to help the audience keep them with you. Think always about the audience, what they are, where they're coming from, what they're hearing. And the other thing about the virtual world is people may be watching at different times of the day and on different devices. So imagine someone coming home from their clinic in the evening, maybe on the metro, the tube, and they're listening on a smartphone. And then there'll be other people who maybe gather together and watch a session together. So this is also focusing on, that variation that they might have will help you adapt your presentation to your audience, and it will make the experience for the audience so much better. So now we know who we're speaking to. Next, we need to know what we want to say. And you'll say, well, that's obvious. I'm presenting my abstract. I'm presenting my research. Yes, you are, but you have a lot of information in that abstract. Participants all have access to the abstract already. They can go away and read that. Think about what the benefit is to the audience in listening or watching you. What are you adding? What do you want them to do? What transformation do you want them to have? Maybe you want someone to contact you to offer a collaboration. Do you want them to ask questions? Do you want people to replicate something that you're doing? Maybe you're looking for a future employer and they could be in the audience, or a funder for your research. Maybe your methodology is unique and you want to inspire an audience member to try it out in their own circumstances. The point of you presenting is not to copy and paste your abstract. It is to bring the human element to your research, bring it to life. Okay, think of it that way. And this is really what we call the call to action or the key message. Being clear on this will help you decide what information to include. All of you, whether you have 5-minute audio or an 8 or 12-minute video presentation, that is a short period of time and it goes much quicker than you think. So being really focused on exactly what message you want to convey, that will help you choose which information to focus on. All content that you include should lead to that key message. So a little exercise for you. Think about, why should they listen to you instead of someone else? Write it down. Why should they listen to you, not pick another abstract to listen to? And even more importantly, what do you want the audience to remember about your research? If you can get this down to a really short sentence, that's so powerful. Think of it as like a bumper sticker on the back of a car or a billboard that you might drive past. Something that people remember, that resonates with them, that they can take away, because people will have a lot of information. They'll be watching a lot of sessions and seeing lots of presentations. If you can be really precise and concise on that message before you start putting your presentation together, that will make sure that you have an impactful, engaging presentation. Take the moment, write it down, share it with us if you'd like. I see some people sharing things in the chat. I can't bring up the chat for some reason. Why can I not bring up the chat? Here it is. Okay. Clinical implication of research, new ideas to implement. Yep, be really precise about what those ideas are when you write it down for yourself. The questions, I will write the questions again into the chat. Following that. What we are missing to get our patients better. I want my work to be presented in this Congress due to novelty in my exercises. Good, and be precise about that. What is novel about your exercises? So what? Maybe you want other people to use these novel exercises. But then focus on that, not just, hey, look, I have some novel exercises. what you want to turn that around to is try these exercises. They're great for these sort of patients, and this is how you do it. That's what I'm getting at, getting really precise. Benefits of inclusive fitness in children. Yes, but what are those benefits? I want to walk away knowing the 3 top benefits of inclusive fitness for children, for example. Future needs for physiotherapists. Yes, but what are they? Drill down deeper. You don't need to answer them in the chat. This is for yourself to make a note of, to think critically about what you want to say. Uniqueness of qualitative evidence. Again, be more specific. Show the impact of COVID in students' education. Good. The impact of COVID on students' education is, that's your key message. How it adds a new perspective to the profession. Again, get specific. Good. So you're starting to think about this. I think most of you need to work a little bit further to be specific. We're not looking for a title of your abstract. We're looking for, I'm going to watch your presentation and I'm going to walk away saying, oh, I need to walk an extra 5 minutes a day. I don't know. That's just a random thing. Or I need to stretch after every walk, for example. Or I need to get rid of my cushions on my bed, or whatever it is. So really specific, so that I know when I finish your presentation, I know what to do. I know what to think, feel, or do after your presentation. Be really specific. And this probably will take some more thought. This is great what you're putting in there. So you've already started that process. And you notice I'm making you do this before we talk about the PowerPoint. And the reason is that as soon as we open the PowerPoint, we get distracted finding a good image with formatting it nicely, changing the fonts and colors. And then by the time we're finished, we've got too many slides, too much information, and we've forgotten exactly what the point of our presentation is. So really have a think about this. Great, you've already started to think about these things. Write them down now. Be as specific as you can so that you think of the audience walking away knowing what to do, think, or feel with that information. Remember, your job is, as a presenter, is not just to present your abstract or project, but it's to move the audience. So keep that in mind. So now we know exactly who we are speaking to and where we are taking them. So I think of that as the audience is over here and the end goal, the key message, is at the end of a path. So we need to take the audience on a path, on a journey to that end goal. And that's where we need some sort of structure. You can just wander around and give them lots of information, which might be a lovely presentation, but it won't have as much impact as if you're really focused and think of this pathway. So how do we do that? Next exercise for you. You have started thinking about your key message. What 3, maximum 4 things do you need to tell the audience in order to take them from where they are now to where you want to take them? What are the 3 or 4 main points that you need to include? What immediately comes to your mind? Don't tell me introduction, methodology, results, conclusion. I've got that in your abstract already. Drill down further. What are those 3 or 4 points? And I'm focusing on just 3 or 4 because you don't have much time. And what you'll find is once you start putting information together, your time will be gone too quickly. And then it's really hard to choose the things to take out afterwards. It's much easier to just be really focused at the beginning stages before you open your PowerPoint to think of those 3 or 4 points, illustrate them well, give examples, explain them well, and there you will find you fill your time. And that will be much more focused and useful for the audience. See a few suggestions coming in here. Why I won't be the only one? Why this is important, how to implement this. Okay, just other suggestions on main messages. Brilliant. So take a couple of minutes or take a couple of seconds to jot down 2, 3, maximum 4 pieces of information you absolutely must include within your presentation. And this is what you're going to focus your presentation on. Just 3 or 4. So obviously you'll need more time and thought about this. You can talk to colleagues as well, try out different ideas, different angles of what information you want to include. But the other thing that's really important about the structure of a presentation is the opening and the closing. I'm sure you've all heard of the recency and primacy effect, right? You want to grab the audience right from the beginning, and then you want to leave them with your message sort of reverberating in their ears. So how can we create a really strong opening and closing? Well, here's a couple of suggestions. Use a story. Okay, so you might have a case study or an example of a mix of, sort of the ideal patient that you can illustrate your point with. You can tell their story in a brief way. You might want to start by asking a question of the audience or posing a problem to them. Or maybe there's a quote that really gets to the heart of your key message that you could begin with. This is so much more powerful than starting with the typical, hello, my name is Helen. Today I'm going to talk about la da 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 da. The conference participants have your name, they have your title, and they've potentially even read your abstract before they even see your presentation. So don't waste your precious time in presenting yourself. Go straight in with something that's going to make them go, oh, this is a presentation I absolutely need to listen into. And it's so much easier to keep the audience with you if you grab them right from the beginning. The other thing you can do for an opening is give them a preview. Explain why they should stay and listen or watch the entire presentation. Make your topic sound interesting. Make it relevant to the audience. And then similarly, to close, you want to not close with a thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. We know that you're grateful. Ideally, the audience will be grateful for your fantastic presentation, that you've imparted your knowledge to them. So a stronger way to finish is to find some sort of sense of resolution. So if you start with a question at the beginning of your presentation, maybe you want to end with an answer to that question or an additional question. So it gives a sense of resolution to the whole presentation. It's quite satisfying as an audience member to do that. You could also summarize the main ideas, leave the audience with a challenge, maybe, remind the audience of why they listen to you. And so there are lots of different things that you can do to finish. Maybe you just want to finish with your key message, simply. The other thing about the structure is to make sure that your presentation is within time. Check the information you've been sent. If you're an e-poster, it's maximum 5 minutes audio only. If you are an abstract presenter, it's either maximum 8 minutes or 12 minutes. Check that information before you start putting your presentation together. Okay. Now, we have already, maybe I should pause here to take some questions. I see some coming in. Let me see. So we've got some people coming up with some ideas. Great. Don't forget in the chat to share with all panelists and attendees, because the other attendees can learn from the feedback you're giving as well. I see a few people have only sent to the panelists, and it's much more useful if you feel comfortable to share it with all attendees. So change the to the drop-down menu, all panelists and attendees. mine is a case study. Give a brief overview of the case like a story. Mention the benefit of good. Good. It sounds like you are onto the right track there. Can you guide us with the e-poster preparation a bit? Yes, I will touch on that in the next section when we talk about PowerPoint. Provide an example in your speech for beginning and end. Do I have one here? Okay. Challenge accepted. I will try to add one in when I'm showing you the PowerPoint to show you how you might be able to include a really powerful story to begin and end with. Remind me if I forget. That's Dr. Bhumika. E-poster. Yes, e-poster. Yes, we understand. You want some more guidance on e-posters. After the PowerPoint tips, we'll see if you have some additional questions on that. Okay, we have some questions in the Q&A as well. Should the audio be added to the PowerPoint poster? Yes. Tracy is also answering your question through the type function. We will also give you some more information on that, but yes. Do you have multiple chances to make a correct record? Yes, this is the beauty of recording, pre-recording your presentation. You can practice as many times as you want until you have the best presentation ready to go. And I would encourage you to do that. Don't leave it to the day before the presentation is due to be uploaded. Start thinking about this now. Get your setup, which I'll talk about in a minute, and practice your record. Okay, you practice many times until you feel comfortable and you get it uploaded within the deadline. Good. So now we can actually open the PowerPoint slide, believe it or not. You have everything, and you see this is a big point for me. It's important that you have these things fixed in your mind and already prepared before you open the PowerPoint. Or Google Slides or Keynote, whichever application you're using. Both the slide deck for your presentation and the e-poster can be created in PowerPoint, and that's what we recommend. You can use, as I said, Keynote or Google Slides or anything else similar. That's not a problem. There are no PowerPoint templates for the Congress. There is for e-poster as examples, but for the Congress, you don't have to use any particular template. You may need to use the template of your institution or workplace. But you have a couple of examples given to you by the Secretariat to help guide you in what would, if you don't know, then you can use the ones that have been given to you. And the important thing about PowerPoint is that it is a way to illustrate and support what you're saying. It's not there to repeat or replace what you're saying. It's called a visual aid. It should help the audience in a visual way to understand the point of your presentation. This is for both e-poster and presentation, but the e-poster needs to be dealt in a slightly different way. So how do we do this? Well, as a reminder, this is more or less what your presentation will look like once it's on the Congress website. You have the PowerPoint share, which takes up most of the space, and then you have the opportunity to include your video, your lovely smiling face. And it's worth preparing both of those. For the e-poster, you don't have the opportunity to do a video capture, and you have one slide where all your information needs to be included, and you need to include the audio, which should basically help the audience focus on different elements of your poster. So how does that work in practice? How do we put a PowerPoint together? I'm sure all of you have put hundreds, if not thousands, of slide decks together before, but I'm going to challenge you to do it even better for this Congress. This is a typical presentation from actually this is from the 2019 World Physiotherapy Congress. Tell me in the chat, what do you think? What do you like about this slide? What don't you like? What would you change? What would you do differently? I'm losing this chat again. I don't know why. Okay, so what have we got here? We have, oh, lots. Great. Okay, so dull, too many words, wordy. Like the colors, but there's too much text. Too many words, too much text. Use keywords. Yep, we'll talk about that. A bit busy. Content should be left. Too much to read. Too much text. Simple. Yep. Too much saturation. Single slide. Too many words. Too much text. Too much text. Okay, you get the point. I'm glad that you agree. There is definitely too much text on this, but I think you'll also recognize that this is quite a typical slide. It's basically what I see is someone has copy and pasted from their abstract into their PowerPoint slide. And that's a pity because you've lost an opportunity there. So, okay, there are too many words there. How can we make it more interesting? How can we make it actually illustrate what the presenter is trying to get across rather than be a repeat of that? Well, the first thing I would do is identify what those key messages are. Now, this one's kind of simple. I think there are 3 key points here, which we can see from the default bullet point. And in fact, these are put in quite a logical order, but sometimes they're not. So this one would work. So what can we do with this? Well, if each of those points merits a slide of its own, we could give a slide of its own. However, in this case, I don't think they do. I think they could become basically our script, and this is how we could do it differently. Gerald and Barbara are a typical older couple. They spend a lot of their time sitting on the sofa, knitting, reading, watching TV. But we know that sedentary behavior, especially sitting, has long-term detrimental health effects across the age range. So my colleagues and I wanted to identify the key physical, physiological, and psychological outcomes that were influenced by acute periods of inactivity, such as we saw from Gerald and Barbara. Our findings show the importance of avoiding prolonged bouts of sedentary behavior. Ultimately, we want to get the message out there to inform older people, the Barbaras and Geralds of the world, as well as the professionals and organizations working with these older people, on what duration of sedentary behavior will lead to adverse outcomes in older people. What did I do? Well, I took the main points from the abstract, the objectives and a bit of the background, and I told them like a story. So hopefully this answered what you were asking for an example. I just threw that in now. I gave these people a name. I gave them the real life feeling. And I could have gone into more details. I could have told you their ages and maybe some history of them, something like that. But I took the bullet points, I simplified them so that I could actually say them, because the written word is different from the spoken word. And I made it much more conversational. I used a really simple image, an elderly couple going for a bike ride, and a headline, a simple message, a call to action. And then this slide helps illustrate the point of my presentation, but it doesn't distract from it. You have to listen to me to understand the whole point. And as an audience member, you are probably, hopefully, more interested. You have the necessary background, and you've listened to me bring the research to life. You see the point of it. And that's really powerful using a human story. And then you can again close that in a nice way, as you asked me for an example. So for example, you could close after your presentation, so you present some of your data and things like that, At the end, you could even show the same exact image, exact slide, say, what does this mean for the future? What does it mean for Gerald and Barbara? We need to spread the word of the dangers of a sedentary lifestyle. Thanks to our research, we see that sitting for more than 2 hours may potentially have harmful effects on blood pressure, fatigue, and vigor components of mood in older adults. And we saw the benefits of breaking up long periods of sitting. We now call for interventions to support this in older adults, such as Gerald and Barbara, to improve both cardiovascular and metabolic health. End of presentation. Isn't that more effective than the bullet points? I hope so. And I hope I've also shown you how you can bring a little element of a story to help open and close the presentation. Okay, and you could obviously develop it further. So that's all very well and good, but you will need to present your data, right? You've got abstracts. I'm sure you've collected data. You need to present your findings and the conclusions. How do you do that? You can't always do it with simple images and a story. So I've got an example for you here as well. Again, this is a typical data slide that we see at such a conference. It's from the same presentation that we saw the first example of the background and study objectives. Again, in the chat, what do you think of this? What works, what doesn't work? I've cut it off a bit, sorry about that. But otherwise, what do you like about this, these graphs, the way it's presented? Is it clear to you? Do you know where to focus? What works well? Tell me in the chat. So many colors, small text, bit congested, clumsy, hard to read. I do not know the key message. Distracting colors. Colors are too bright, distracting, difficult to understand, confusing. The colors do draw attention, you're right. Too busy, need highlight, too much information. Great, so you get the point. So again, not very helpful slide. If I was to see this, I would stop listening to what the presenter was saying, and I would start to try to understand it myself. And my other question is, why are these two graphs side by side on one slide? Is there something I need to see from one to the other? It's a bit confusing. And then the use of colors. For me, if it's there, if it's colored, it should mean something. Why is 1 hour, one graph, one color, 1 hour on the other graph, a different color? Right? It just starts me thinking, which is a good thing, but in the wrong direction, and I stop listening to the actual presentation. So how can we present this in a different way? Remember the exercise I asked you to do before. Why should they listen to you? What should the audience take away from your research? This is already going to help focus which data points you need to present. That will help you. Okay, so how do I make this more accessible? Well, firstly, I don't think you need both those graphs on the same slide. You only need 2 graphs on the slide if there's some sort of comparison between them going on. And here there's really not, well, at least not from my understanding. So I pick the mean arterial pressure. Unclutter the slide. Too much data at once does not help the audience. So take one important piece of data or finding at a time. Dedicate one slide to each of these. For example, with changes in mean arterial pressure, the key results shown here simply so that people will actually be able to remember them, and they're highlighted in front of you. If the audience wanted more details, they could ask you questions, which is great because it creates engagement and a conversation, or they can have a look at your poster or abstract in more detail. For this, I've kept it really simple, no design whatsoever, 2 simple colors. I could have put a shape around each of the numbers. I could have brought them in one at a time as I was talking about them, perhaps to help focus the attention more. But you don't need to do too much to keep it simple. And I hope you agree that this is easier to interpret than those graphs. Yes, all the data is important and you have reported on all the data, but your presentation can focus on specific data points. And then you can use a different slide for the other data points you want to highlight from your research. So my biggest takeaway from this is people cannot read and listen at the same time. You're superhuman if you can. Remember that people should be able to interpret your slide within 3 to 4 seconds. That's all. And it should be illustrating and helping the audience understand and take away your key message rather than distracting them. So what are the key points for PowerPoint? Firstly, limit the amount of information on each slide. You can have hundreds of slides if you needed to. You won't need to for up to a 12-minute presentation, but don't worry about the number of slides. It's better to focus each slide on one idea for each slide rather than try to cram them in because you think you have a limited number of slides. Okay? Plus, you don't need to include everything that's on your abstract into your slide deck. Think about key words and key phrases that you can pull out so that people can read those as you're speaking. If you need more words, then you're going to need to be silent for a couple of seconds to allow people to read or interpret a graph or a data set. You should try to keep things light with space, try to keep things simple with maximum 2 fonts, with not too many different colors, no special effects or anything like that. Simple is best, okay? And think from the audience's point of view always. Use images. You know, by nature, humans are visual creatures, and you've probably heard the saying, a picture paints 1,000 words. Well, it's true. If you have a strong, relevant image, it's going to stick in people's memories better and get the message across clearer than if you expect them to read full sentences on a slide and talk to them at the same time. And you can get good quality, royalty-free images. And we're actually in the process of putting together some guidelines on how you can do that. And the other thing I'd like to point out is to spend some time practicing speaking to your slides. Even if you have put them together, you've spent the time to do that, you need to practice when you change, what you say for each slide, how long you spend on each slide. There's nothing worse than getting to a slide and suddenly thinking, oh, I should have presented that before, or what was I trying to say in this slide? Okay, so you need to practice speaking to the slides. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions about putting your PowerPoint together. Okay, approximately, I like this question, Donna. Approximately how many slides in an 8-minute presentation? How long is a piece of string? That's basically the answer. There is no rule of thumb here. It depends on your presentation. You could have 8 slides or you could have 80 if they're well designed. It's really hard to say. What's much better to do is, even before you open the PowerPoint, think about the key message, think about those different things you want to touch on within your presentation, and then think about how you could illustrate each of your points. And that's a much better way rather than how many slides you need. Can we add a video in our presentation? For abstract presenters, yes, you can, and you're encouraged to be on video. Perhaps your question, Georgia, is regarding play a video. If that's the case, I'd have to ask Tracy if that's something you would accept.
Thanks, Helen. So yes, if you're putting a PowerPoint presentation together, you can embed a video clip. So if you've got a demonstration or a patient perspective to include, just make sure you're clear on any consents, permissions, identifying information, and it does need to be embedded. But it can help to demonstrate something. It's something you can probably do more online, actually, than if you were physically present at a meeting. So just make sure it's in there and any permissions are included.
Thanks, Tracy. And I also had a challenging thought. And I don't know what, Tracy, we haven't talked about this much, but if you're talking about novel exercises like one of our attendees was talking about, you could even show those exercises live and record them if you set up your camera correctly. Would you be against that, Tracy?
No, I think we're looking for creativity here. Let's think about how do we deliver something that not everything looks the same. You want to grab people's attention. They're going to remember something that stands out and is a bit different. So you've got a time limit. You've got some guidelines to use there. Just work with it.
Cool. I think it's great if you've got something practical, physical to show, that you actually do it live. Just make sure, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that your camera and your lighting and things are set up correctly for that. But I think it could be really powerful. So hopefully, Georgia, we've answered your question there. Is there any fixed sequence of content in presentation? No. In fact, typically, we often see someone presenting in the same order that you have put your abstract together, but you absolutely do not need to do that. The most important thing is think about your key message, and you can take your audience on whatever journey you need to get them there. Start with your conclusion first. That can be really powerful. Or start with a data point, a part of your results that was surprising or really strong. And then you can backtrack and explain how you got there. That can be much better than going through a specific order. I'm going to come back to the e-poster in a minute. Where and when will you provide information about royalty-free image sources? The team are working on that currently. We can also put some websites which are really handy in the chat now. There are lots of websites out there now. You can even do it in the Google search. I learned today you can search for images and then you filter by royalty free or common license and find options. You can also find them in some versions of PowerPoint where you insert image or insert picture and then you can choose stock images, and there they have, it's a little bit limited, but they have some examples that you could use as well, and those are royalty free. How do we do the video to go with the PowerPoint? We will talk about that in a minute. Is there a specific format for the conflicts of interest slide? No. What I would recommend for the conflict of interest, which you should be declaring, is you don't need to say anything about it. If it's at the bottom of your screen, for example, if you want to start with your title slide, you could just say no conflicts of interest are declared, or whatever if you have a conflict of interest, and then you've declared it. You don't actually need to speak to it, but there's no specific format you need to use for that. When we upload the presentation, do we upload a PowerPoint, then upload a video of us presenting separately or together? And if it's together, how do you get it so it's together? Good question. I will address that in a minute in the last section of my presentation. Then there was a question about the e-poster. How can you focus the individual's attention while listening to the recording? Okay, that's a great one because it's not the same as a typical slide deck where you go through the different slides and can focus people's attention. So one way you do that is with the design. And I really like this better presentation way because, as you can hear, I'm quite keen on the key message being very in your face and very clear. And that's what the better presentation better poster, presentation template does. So one way is to make sure that that is very clear. The other thing is, as you're speaking to the your presentation, there are different ways you can do it. Either you've only got 5 minutes, so you can maximum, you don't need to fill that time. You can just focus on the real life implications, for example. And if you wanted to, you could say, in the bottom right hand corner, you will see the graph which shows da 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 da, and you could explain it like that. So you could almost take people on a journey to focus on the different elements that you've put in the in your poster, knowing that people will also probably explore your poster without the audio. So you need to sort of cater to both of them. But I think that's probably the easiest way, is to have your key message very clear, and then say I'd like to draw your attention to the methodology. What was unusual that we did here was this and this and this. What that resulted in was blah, blah, blah. In the middle, you'll see a graph about blah, 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 etc. And what are we going to do next? And then you can talk about that verbally. So I hope that helps. Do we have any other questions? Let me upload the okay. I think the other ones we will deal with either in the chat, if we can put some links to the images websites, and the how to record, etc. I'm going to talk about now. Oh gosh, this is a good one. In the chat, I see, as an audience, I usually want to see enough evidence to support a statement. Stories are okay, but the trust me approach is not why I came to research-based conferences. What is the balance? Good point. I'm absolutely not saying that you should not include the data. The data is included anyway. You've submitted your abstract. It will be available for people. What I'm saying is that the presentation can pick people's interest, help them focus, see the real life impact, and that's what stories can help. And then if you're not going to talk about all of your different data, you can invite people to go and have a look at the data. Or you can actually focus much more of your time on those data points. This is not, you don't all have to do stories, and sometimes they're not relevant, sometimes they're difficult to do. If that doesn't meet with your own style, absolutely don't do it. It's just a suggestion of different ways of doing it. And remember, the most important thing is that the presentation doesn't replace your abstract, and it doesn't replace what you're saying, it illustrates it. So I hope I sort of addressed that. I agree there is a balance between how much data you're presenting and how much storytelling you're having. And I think that's with everything. We need to cater to different people, the way they think, what they're looking for. So if you're very data oriented and you're expecting to attract those sort of people, maybe you need to focus more on the data rather than the storytelling. But if you can make the real life link, and storytelling can be very powerful for that, then I think you're going to hit all of those bases and satisfy those who are more heart oriented and those who are more head oriented. But it is a difficult balance. And maybe the other thing I wanted to say is, there is no perfect PowerPoint. There is no perfect presentation. We all have our different styles, and you could present the same abstract in 50 different ways. So you need to find what's relevant for you. And maybe for this conference, you want to highlight one particular thing, and next time you're presenting your research, you want to highlight a different thing because you've got more data, because you're talking to a different audience, etc. So, there is no right and wrong here. Okay, so now we move into how do we record these things? We're up to lights, camera, action. So the important thing is to take the time to set yourself up correctly for the recording. First thing is the camera. Many modern laptops have an inbuilt camera, and it's usually okay quality. If you find that your laptop is not a good enough quality, maybe you can ask around and see if you can borrow a better quality camera. The other thing about the camera is it needs to be positioned correctly. Too often than not, we see up people's nostrils. I'm sure you know what I mean. I'm just going to take I've got a little clip-on camera. A lot of presentations these days are done like this, where you actually don't even see the eye contact. Okay, this is because the camera is on the laptop and the laptop is at an angle which is comfortable for working in. So how do you avoid everyone seeing up your nose? You position your laptop higher than you normally would so that your camera is basically at the same level as your eyes. The other thing you need to do is make sure that the camera is straight on rather than angled up or down. The other thing you sometimes see is half a face like this. Again, it's just someone who hasn't thought about the setup. Take the time to find the right place for you to set up. And as I said, you might need to have a box or some books to put your computer or your camera on. Same thing if you are standing up to record. You may need to position your laptop on a shelf or a desk. I've done presentations where I've had a chair on a desk, on a table, and then my laptop on top so that I get the right height. So take the time to find a good place for that. Then related to the camera is the lighting. It's all very good to have a good camera like I do, but you see, if I don't have any lighting, it's not as good. Okay, so take the time to find some lighting. The lighting should be behind the camera rather than behind your head, because behind your head, just with when we're taking photos, if you're looking straight into the sun, you get a silhouetted look, and you won't see the details of the face. So the light goes behind the camera. Be careful of the time of day, because that can affect things greatly. In the middle of the day, I've got quite a lot of sun coming from this window, and so I need to close the curtains. Otherwise, there's a funny glare on the camera. Okay, that's the lighting. Sound, again, the built-in microphone for many laptops is pretty good quality these days. But you may want to, depending on your situation, depending on the quality, but also the background noise that you might have, you might want to put in headphones, just the simple ones, in your ear or over your head, or you might want to ask around and see if anyone has a better quality microphone. But it's not necessary. Okay, it's worth checking in advance and seeing if your equipment is good enough. And what we're looking for is as professional as possible. We're not expecting you to fork out a lot of money to buy things, but often you can ask around, and by doing that, you can raise the quality of the video capture and the sound capture. The other thing is the background. Ideally, you have quite a basic neutral background, not too cluttered, and we don't recommend that you use a virtual background, only if you absolutely have to. The problem with the virtual background is that you sometimes lose parts of people's heads, or their hands suddenly come out of nowhere into the camera, and that can be a little bit distracting. So unless you absolutely have to, try to do without a virtual background. Then what do you wear? Well, bold, plain colors are much better than small details. If you've got flowers or stripes, they can come up funny in the video capture. So ideally, you just have one unique color. You are welcome to wear what you like, essentially. I recommend you look as professional as you want to look, but you should be comfortable and authentic. If you don't generally wear a shirt and tie, then don't put them on for this recording. You won't feel comfortable, and then you won't come across as yourself, and that's important. You are welcome to wear a traditional costume if you'd like. We've got, as we said, people from all over the world presenting and attending, so they'll be nice. However, be careful with the traditional costume, because sometimes they have very busy patterns, and that can be a little bit distracting. So, but have a look into it. Now, I've already mentioned eye contact at the beginning. Hopefully you remember that, the importance of looking into the camera, speaking into the camera when you are recording yourself. You might need to put a photo behind the camera, or an arrow, or a picture, or a soft toy, so that you remember to look into the camera. It really does make a difference. If someone's presenting like this the whole time, I don't know about you, but I get a bit bored and I feel a little bit isolated if they're as though they're not speaking to me, compared to someone actually looking into the camera lens. And again, that takes time and practice. So overall, take the time to set up properly. Don't leave this for the day before the recording is due to be uploaded, please. Now, before we move on, take a minute. What do you need to change in terms of your technical setup? What do you need to look into? Do you need to find a different place to do the recording? Do you need to maybe borrow a better camera or microphone? Maybe you need to find a bedside lamp to add and to illuminate your face. Do you need to record early in the day, at night? This will be affected by the light that you're getting, the natural light, as well as the sound around you. Maybe you're in a small apartment building and you can hear lots of things. These are things to think about. Make a note of them. Have you scheduled time in your very busy diary to practice? Have you scheduled time to record and re-record? Maybe you need to even ask a friend or a colleague to help you out in doing this. Make a note of what you need to do and commit to doing that. So in terms of recording, many of you have asked, how do we record? The guidelines that you've been sent have some instructions on how to record. What we recommend is to use a platform such as Zoom, which is free for a short period of time, to basically run a meeting with yourself, with the video capture and the share screen of your PowerPoint. Very similar to what we're doing today. And there you can record either onto your computer or into the cloud. And there you already have a very good quality presentation. You could use WebEx, you could use Loom, you could use MS Teams. You could even use the app that comes with your operating system potentially, as long as you have the PowerPoint share option and the video capture. You can actually do it within PowerPoint as well, although personally I find it a little bit fiddly. But if you know how to do that, or know someone who already knows, or have the time to have a look at some training videos on that, that is also an option. In terms of the e-poster, we are not expected to speak on camera. We just need the audio, so your voice. The easiest way to do it is directly in PowerPoint. So once you have your slide with your poster, you can just record your voice speaking through the maximum 5-minute audio. This is the easiest way to do it. So don't leave this to the last minute. Do a trial run. Ask questions if you're not sure. Ask the Secretariat questions for more instructions, more help. Ask colleagues and family and friends if you need help. Don't leave this to the last minute, because you just don't need that extra stress. And there was another question. Let me just go back to the questions. Hopefully I've answered them. But I think there was another question about e-posters. That's a good one. I don't know if you, maybe Tracy, I'll just mention this one that you answered. There was a question about whether the e-poster can be without audio, with no talking at all. And yes, you can. The audio on the e-poster is optional. Okay, so if you don't want to do that, you do not have to. You can just present that slide as your e-poster. Are there any other? I just saw a comment come through. Yes, we're aware that we're past the hour. Sorry about that. We had lots of questions, but that's a good thing. If you do need to go, we totally understand. Before I hand back, and we'll keep an eye on these questions. Sorry, Donna. Once we record on Zoom, how do we upload the recording in PowerPoint? With a link? Yes, a link will be sent to you from the Secretariat to show you how to upload your presentation. And Tracy's going to explain the deadlines for that in a minute. So before I hand back to Tracy, I have one last little exercise or question for you. What one thing will you do differently or stop doing, or what is your biggest takeaway? I find with trainings, it's really good to identify that before you've even finished the training, because it helps you remember it and commit to it. What one thing will you do differently or stop doing or start doing, or what is your biggest takeaway from this training? You can share this with us in the chat if you feel comfortable. Otherwise, it could just be a note for yourself. Tell an engaging story. Great, Kara. Look forward to seeing that. Focus on key messages. Yes, Annika, you absolutely need to define your key message and keep focused on that. Keynotes before preparing the slides. Yay! Use a story. Yes, not just when teaching. Yeah, we are teaching in a way at the conference, so feeling calmer. That's good. I hope that means you are feeling calmer, Abdullah. Look in the camera when you're presenting. Yes, less is more. Yes, keep things simple. Be precise. Yep, more focus, the more impact you'll have. Focus on the key message as opposed to presenting individual parts of the research. Great. Good, strong opening. Yes, precise. Courageous. Use stories. Energetic. Highlight the main points. Slow down. Yes, simple is best. Focus, accurate in data presentation. Great. Sounds like many of you have got something to take away, something that's going to challenge you to do things differently. Use cue cards. Yes, you can use, we didn't talk about that. You can use cue cards, prepare a script for yourself or notes under your PowerPoint in the presentation. What's it called? I don't remember what it's called, the section at the bottom, which you can put your notes in. Definitely prepare that. That helps a lot. You probably have seen, I've referred to my notes a few times during this presentation. That's absolutely acceptable and very helpful. Great. Okay, well, I think I can stop there. We're going to stay online for a little bit longer to answer further questions, but I can hand back to you now, Tracy.
Thanks, Helen. Lots of questions coming up, which is why it's really important we're staying on and answering them for everybody as much as possible. And just to emphasize, the team at World Physiotherapy really want you to have a positive experience. So don't worry about any question. But just as Helen said, we don't want you to be stressed at the last minute. Please don't stress us by leaving it to the last minute as well. We've got more time to help you at the moment, which brings me to some important key dates. So yesterday, we sent out an email to all of you with platform and e-posters with the upload link and instructions. Don't lose that email, because some of you were asking, where's the link? You've got it. So please do check spam, check junk, make sure you have got it and follow up with us if you haven't. The presenter tips that we've got on our website, I just want to stress again, we've got both platform and e-poster tips, how to put the whole thing together, as well as the optional templates for the e-poster. So the platform is actually going to be going live next week. But the 11th of March is the date you have to really focus on. It's the deadline for all presentations, posters, recording, audio commentaries, everything to be uploaded. We have over 1,200 pieces of content that's being uploaded. It's a lot for us to organize and check ready for the go live. So your abstracts are going to be lifted from an embargo on the 31st of March. And then your content will be there for all people to access once we go live. So the live content goes up as well as all the on-demand content. But everything is available for up to 3 months after the Congress. As I say, your content is going to be there. It's going to have good exposure, but do keep checking back for your particular abstract and presentation for that comments feature. So what we want to ask you just as we finish here is to rerun the poll that we asked you at the beginning, where we asked you about how confident you were feeling. So Rach, thank you, popping the poll back up again, and we'll just give you a moment to look at that. So Helen, I have to say, a huge sense of relief. That person who was down in the terrified and worried is no longer there. So big success. And I know last time we had about 44% in the confidence. So Rach, if we can just show the results again now. We've again lifted people up in their confidence levels. So that's really important for us. And there's lots of information we've digested. So we know that this recording will be up in the next couple of days. You can come back to the website. We ran this session last week as well. So there's also that version. No harm in listening to both. We present slightly differently. My colleague Birgit was on the last one. The questions that come up could be different. So you can go in and choose the last week's to rerun now if you want something while it's really fresh. So I think, Helen, really, thank you so much for working with us. We want to do everything we can to give our participants, all of you, a really positive experience. The Congress is the content. And yes, we're missing the personal interactions, but we hope you feel that somehow you can deliver an engaging presentation, which means that the audience will be engaged and want to follow up with you and your really important work as well. We're happy to stay on. We know some people have already signed off, but we'll keep running at the moment. So if you have got questions, you can keep popping them into the Q&A and into the chat. So we will stay online. But for everybody else that's going, thank you so much for working with us. We're really excited, slightly daunted, but it's a great opportunity for us to bring everybody together online. And it's not that far away, but focus on those deadlines, please. All right, we hope you found it really helpful and good luck with all your preparation. Thank you.
Tracy, there are a couple of questions left here. I don't know if you can answer them.
Let's bring them up. How much do we need to put into the e-poster? What are the absolutely necessary headings to cover? So what's necessary? Same principles, I guess, to your platform presentation. Think about your key messages. So we've given you 2 examples in the templates. I'm a big fan, I must confess, of the better poster where you grab attention with your conclusion right in the middle, but you then still are telling the story around your purpose, your methodology, your results in more detail, but it's where you place the emphasis. The traditional poster template follows more classic headings. So those are guides. You've probably been to conferences, or even if you start looking online, you'll see things that you find more appealing. So just have a look around. And as I say, as are optional. The identities should be there on e-poster and paper presentations. So if you're referring to your authorship, it is best to put it in there because it's around making sure that your intellectual copyright is protected. It is there because it's linked to your abstract, but I would always say make sure your name is on your poster and on your slide deck. Should the format of the e-poster be PDF? I think we're fine to accept both PDF and PowerPoint upload because it's just the one piece of information. So I think there are things coming up in the chat as well. Let me just bring up the chat.
Yeah, there was one question about if you have to use the video capture and you don't. That is totally optional. However, personally, I find it so much nicer to see the person behind the voice and behind the research. So if you feel comfortable doing that, we would love to see your face and hear you speak as well. But it is optional.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
There's one more question that's come up. Do we need to include references in the poster? Oh, that's a good question.
So we've included it on the template, but our advice is keep it to a minimum. really, if you want references, that's where I'd use the QR code. I'd use that and direct people and put them onto a website somewhere that can substantiate it. At the end of the day, you're presenting something that is unique. It's your piece of work, and it may be grounded in other people's, but just think about why you need those in the poster or in the platform presentation. Although it's important to recognize source material, but if you've got more, I would say that goes into your additional content that you can direct people to.
And Tracy, there's a question about the template design for the e-poster. Do they have to follow the template, or can they use their own?
No, you can use your own. We've given them just as illustration purposes. We're particularly thinking about people who perhaps are presenting for the first time. And we have put them on our website and in on e-poster as optional.
There's just a question in the chat about for the e-poster, no chance of showing your faces. Well, again, you could use the QR code, which could lead someone to a website with you doing whatever you like. In fact, I mean, that's your own ownership. So it's a great way. You know, one thing that people do use for the QR code is to do a translation or an interpretation, or you could indeed do a whole separate presentation if you wanted to within that site that you lead people to within the QR code. But within the e-poster itself, no, unfortunately, you won't see your beautiful faces.
Yeah, QR code lead to personal blogs. Yeah, it can lead to whatever information. We're not putting any constraints on that. We want you to be creative. Last time we've had people link to YouTube, to video clips. They gave an extended presentation. They added some content in other languages as well. So you can be creative.
There's another question about is closed caption required for video? And it's not, but I guess people could if they wanted to.
Yes, optional. So can we add a short video of training or research exercises in QR codes in an e-poster? Yeah, a really good example that is, because it's difficult to show that in an e-poster. So if you're referring to a new exercise regime, some particular advice or program, you could very much use your QR code to link to a website where you're hosting a video demonstrating.
Any other questions coming through?
I can't see any new ones.
No.
Okay. All right. So, as I say, if anybody who's still online with us, and we've still got over 40 people online, Helen, we're available on email. So use the congress at world.physio to follow up with us, or the abstracts at world.physio, which is where you're getting most of your communications from. And somebody from the team will get back to you. We are keeping our eye on that mailbox because we know you need answers pretty rapidly, and we want you to feel really prepared, because then you'll meet our deadlines. So team effort all round. So thanks, everybody, and good luck with your final preparations. Thanks, Helen.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Good luck.